Word document. Oh, there it is. There. Yeah, so no, because I gotta be able to read this. Yeah. It says it's unstable. Yeah, so can you move it over so I can see the whole thing? Yeah.
Or you can.
A little bigger.
I'll be living. You can just have them all.
I'll just have no word.
Okay.
Yeah. And then
Is your thing now? Let me know. Yeah, however you want. So just tell me. Just
all right. Okay, so in a celebration of Earth Day, I chose a medium of watercolor to embrace the importance of water and biodegradable paper. Water is thought to have cleansing power, and water symbolizes many things, including life and death, strength, change, healing, dreaming, and unconditional love. Depending on the condition and clearness, water could also represent both good and bad health. So the specific meaning of water symbolism varies from tribe to tribe. However, among all Native Americans, water is highly regarded and cherished. Water is also a common Native American symbol in writings and art used to share ideas and history through generations. So the water symbol usually looks like two parallel squiggly lines and was thought to represent purity, fertility, and life. Water can also symbolize different things depending on the way it is represented visually. For example, running water is a symbol of the continuity of life. So I'm a doctoral student at National Louis University in the Curriculum Advocacy and Policy Program, and my area of research focuses on the growing concern of Native American students in higher education that face challenges within institutional practices and withdrawal from their academic career. I'm just one, but wanted to make a difference in Indigenous education. A particular area is the importance of having one mentor teacher to walk alongside them in their academic journey. Symbolically, though, through a children's picture book, I chose the otter to illustrate the vital importance of having the guidance of a culturally competent mentoring teacher. In the Ojibwa culture, the otter is understood to be a messenger, and they are perceived to be the first medicine bag for her people. Known for their laughter, playfulness, curiosity, creativity, and transformation in many cultures. Research demonstrates that regarding faculty support, despite that positive effect of the role of faculty on academic GPA scores, Bentley writes that representation through Native American faculty has been critical for the success and happiness of Native American students. Furthermore, Native American faculty is essential for developing a culturally inclusive curriculum that includes Native American. Faculty also needs to be educated and empowered with professional development that expands their knowledge of Native culture and experiences. It is essential that universities recognize that when a student from a particular tribe attends their institution, then the university has a relationship with the entire tribe. Next, on number 2. We just did number 1. So number 2 is next. Number 2. Yep. In my children's picture book, Otter and the Olive Tree, the number 2 in Ojibwa, Nish, is represented by 2 olives from an olive tree. This is representative from the peace that comes from more than one within a community, depicting safety in numbers. To define a sense of community, the otter is a visual representation of 2 or more elements that support one another to help strengthen community. For the Indigenous, that could represent a curriculum that reflects culturally relative aspects, and most notably that which embraces cultural diversity. In relation to the sea otter's behavior, that is metaphorically framed by the strength in numbers concept, such as otters holding hands. Research shows that sea otters show their social life revolves around a loose organization of single-sex groups known as a pod or raft. Consisting of about 10 and 100 individuals, though sometimes more, the raft provides safety and respite for the otter in between hunting trips. If you happen to pass by his habitat, you'll often see the otter in its default pose, resting calmly on its back, sometimes tethered to large seaweed or holding hands with another otter to prevent it from floating away. Yes, otters sleep holding hands. But why do otters hold hands? They eat, sleep, swim, play, mate, and give birth in the water. While they're sleeping, they tend to hold their hands to prevent themselves from drifting apart in the swirling sea. Often otters together in a group are a family, and a group of sea otters sleeping in the water is called a raft. And holding hands of each other is a likely behavior of rafts and finds it comforting. Number 3, this presentation would not be complete if it didn't include a story. In my storybook, number 3, Neswi is represented by 3 bears, which is a rough reflection of the importance of the Ojibwa sleeping bear's Dune, which is found on the banks of Lake Michigan. It further embraces the importance of cultural conveying of knowledge and wisdom, as well as the importance of protection of the role of an educator. In the Ojibwa Nation, the bear, which is known as Makwa, is one of the most prominent protection family creatures that continue to sacrifice their own life for the protection of their young, which embodies protection, strength, and leadership within the Ojibwa culture. Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore gets its name from one dune in particular, the mother bear. Perched along the edge of the large dune that towers about Lake Michigan, this dune at one time resembled a sleeping bear. The Anishinaabe used the mother bear as a landmark and tells a story about how she came to be there. 2 different versions of the story are commonly told. These stories are in Anishinaabe, Odawa, Ottawa, Ojibwa, Chippewa, and Potawatomi oral tradition of a sacred place within their homelands in the Great Lakes. Once long ago in the land called Wisconsin across the Great Lake, there was terrible hunger and many people died. A bear and two little cubs were trying to leave that place and come around the lake where there would be more food. They walked for many days on the beach together, but after a while, the two little cubs began to whimper with hunger, and so the bear decided to swim across the rest of the lake. They waded into the water, one cub on each side of the bear, and they swam off into the lake a long way. After a while, the cubs began to get very tired, and so the bear said, "Try hard, the land is not very far." And very soon they did come in sight of land. But gradually the cubs got weaker, and only 10 miles away, one cub sank into the water. Soon after, the other also drowned. The bear's heart was broken, but she could do nothing. She waded ashore and laid down, looking out in the water where her cubs had died. Eventually, both of them came to the surface as two little islands, and so the bear still lies there atop the dunes looking after her children. Long ago, along the Wisconsin shoreline, a mother bear and her two cubs were driven into Lake Michigan by a raging forest fire. The bears swam for many hours, but soon the cubs tired. Mother bear reached the shore first and climbed to the top of a high cliff to watch and wait for her cubs. The cubs drowned within sight of the shore. The Great Spirit created two islands to mark the spot where the cubs disappeared, and then created a solitary dune to represent the eternal visual of Mother Bear. I did this to depict the leadership of a mother protecting her young, much like a teacher's role in the classroom and how they care for their students. Number 4, in the number 4, Niwin is represented by 4 rocks, which highlights the importance of both environmental justice and land sovereignty to embrace the customs and cultures of the Ojibwa people. Native American students have been historically marginalized, which has caused their customs and cultural customs to be devalued. These 4 rocks are a representation of the resilience needed by Native American students to advocate for themselves, respect those who have come before them, and lays a foundation for strengthening the experiences of the next generation to come. Research shows that studies of resilience in Native American communities have found a number of consistent themes, including a strong sense of identity, a legacy of survival passed down by ancestors, feeling good about their tribal culture, accountability and responsibility, and successfully bridging cultures. Sea otters have blue skin across their chests, which creates a pouch for them to store rocks and food. They use the rocks to help them crack open shellfish and clams. The pouch signifies a multitude of strengths and resources that are unique to Native American students. Number 5, the number 5 Nanan represents 5 footprints, symbolizing the importance of protests that have historically protected water safety for all through a Native American perspective. An example of this was a small protest camp formed 5 years ago near the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation in North Dakota, which grew to thousands of people and lit the spark of an international movement across the Dakota Access Oil Pipeline and many pipeline projects since. For months, the Oseti-Sakowin camp drew protesters from North Dakota and across the country, and its influence is still felt at pipeline and climate change protests and in the lives of those who were there in 2016. Oseti-Sakowin youth and allies planned and carried out a 2,000-mile run from North Dakota to Washington, D.C. Teen advocacy groups have been instrumental in drawing attention to the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline. Oseti-Sakowin youth and allies and the One Mind Youth Movement are 2 groups that initiated the encampment near the Standing Rock Sioux. Their mission is to protect the environment near their homes and ancestral lands. Many Wikani in the Lakota language also has spiritual meaning, which is rooted in a connection to nature. As a Native American scholar of environment and religion, I understand what makes the relationship between Native people and the natural world unique. For Native Americans, water does not only sustain life, it is sacred, says the author. That is why the Standing Rock Lakota have been demanding for almost a year a right to clean water, free from the threat of potential environmental harm and to protect its sacredness. Number 6, Nagadawasi. In the children's picture book, The number 6, Kagatawasi, is represented by the branches that emerge from a strong tree, and without it, it is unsustainable. This is meant to represent that Native American students require institutional support in the same way that a tree requires water without gaps and disconnections. Native American students in higher education, because Native Americans, both American and Indians and Alaska Natives, comprise only 1% of the US undergraduate population, and less than 1% of the graduate population. These students are often left out of post-secondary research and data reporting due to small sample size. What data is available indicates that only 16% of Native Americans attain a bachelor's degree or higher, and only 9% attain associate degrees, making the case for a system that is more responsive to the specific needs of these students. There's a whole lot more data with this slide, and if you're interested, I'd be glad to include this with you. The challenges that they do bring up is that Native American students are often excluded from post-secondary data and research due to the small sample size. Native American students are more likely to need and receive grant aids assistance than other students, but less likely to take out student loans. In 2015 and 16, 90% of Native American students received some type of grant aid, compared with the 77% of all students. 31% of Native American undergraduate students take out a federal student loan, compared to 40% of all students. Native American students are less likely to have access to advanced placement or college prep courses in high school. Native American students are also less likely to have family members that have attended college. In 2017, 20% of Native American children under 18 years of age lived in a household with a parent who completed a bachelor's degree or higher, compared to 50% of white households. Number 7. In the picture book, the number 7, Nishwasi, is represented by 7 fish, a school, to help illustrate the historical tensions involved in schooling, specifically as it relates to Native American students. There's arguably the issue of residential boarding school atrocities under the auspices of schooling and religion, and others such as missing Indigenous women. Absolute genocide that has been created under the auspices of school, as our people experience. Also, interestingly, the symbol of the fish is also connected to religion. Even as Indigenous or American Indian people are seen as mythical, inherently wise, or magical, they are assumed to have no depth or individuality. It feels and often looks like we are viewed only in the present, in that specific moment, to fill a void in someone's life, and that the person is discarded. Indigenous people must be valued. American Indian origin stories are not known or shared in most public schools. The vast amount of people in America did not learn the true history of this country and may not have had to deal with the violence that history books leave out. A key part of that history is data on missing an Indigenous woman, as I mentioned, that was uncollected for generations. In Oregon in 2017, a state law passed requiring schools to include Native American history in school curricula. A similar bill was passed in North Dakota in 2021, last year, which utilized the powerful word required, a concept not often heard in regards to teaching the truthful history of this country. The work in Oregon and North Dakota is opening the door for bills that require more of their states, as was the case of the usage of the Nantucket Pequot Mohegan Fund. In the near future, this fund in Connecticut will not only require Native American history be taught, but to acquire funds, schools must abandon the use of racist mascots and logos. Schools need not ignore our historical framework, as our students, more metaphorically speaking, are our next generation of schools of fish. Number 8 in my picture book, the number 8, Nishwasi, was chosen due to the historical importance of Indigenous astronomy and the desire to promote star knowledge for future generations. The Native Skywatchers program was created to ensure that the Native star knowledge did not disappear, and to inspire Native students' interest in science and math. Human beings have looked at the stars for tens of thousands of years. Indigenous people have nurtured critical relationships with the stars, from keen observation and sustainable engineering to place-based ceremony, navigation, and celestial architecture. Our relationship with sky is a deeply rooted part of who we are as a species. The indigenous relationship and knowledge of the sky is exceptional in that it encompasses mind, body, heart, and spirit. I wrote this because of the reflection also that it has went from the sky and to the earth, and that is comparable to the teacher-student relationship. This legacy of our species connection to sky is in critical danger. Indigenous communities and indigenous knowledge systems have suffered great loss, but knowledge and knowledge keepers are still among us. In addition, artificial lights are increasingly saturating our night sky. Will there be a generation that has never known the magic and beauty of a dark night sky? As society becomes increasingly reliant, even infatuated with science and technology, we are missing something. The Native Skywatchers research and programming initiative grounded in indigenous knowledge systems brings to the conversation that part that is critically and urgently needed, the big picture, our part in the Earth-Sky relationship. The Native Skywatchers research and programming initiative is rooted in wellness as we aim to remind every human being that we come from the stars. From the other perspective, in the wild, North American river otters are more likely to be nocturnal, active at night, or crepuscular, active around day and dusk, but anytime daytime activity is not unheard of. Number 9, to most Native tribes, the turtle represents healing, wisdom, truth, spirituality, health, safety, longevity, truth, protection, and fertility. Some Native Americans believe that the turtles contributed to creation because the turtle dove into the primeval waters to retrieve mud, to recreate, or to create Mother Earth. The turtle is also responsible for numerous creation beliefs. In research, there are significant health disparities in Native American populations. This was most recently illustrated in the COVID pandemic, where we all saw images of the pandemic and its effects on the Navajo Nation. With all aspects of COVID, we can all agree that they're needed to embrace healing, truth, health, safety, and protection of all people. Several CRB tribes suffer from plumbing poverty, including 30% to 40% of all Navajo Nation residents, who are 67 times more likely than other Americans to live without running water. The cost of hauling water is at least 70 times more expensive than pipe water. The Navajo Nation has a diabetes crisis because sugary drinks are more readily available and cheaper than portable water. My last number 10, Minawasi. In my journey, this is my lake, Pioneer Lake in Conover, Wisconsin, where I grew up. Whenever I see this picture, I think about obviously how the heavens are opening up. I'm finally home. It provides just kind of a deep cleansing for me. There's no disconnect from God, and water there is absolute purity. And I actually feel small looking at this picture compared to this. This is a very sacred picture that I cherish in my living room wall. In my picture book, number 10, Minawasi is represented by 10 fingers of interconnecting hands, which represents the importance of the multitude of interdependence between water and my life. The choice of utilizing watercolors for the illustrations in my book further highlight these interconnections of water throughout the journey in my life. My story is quite interesting. I was born and raised on the Lac du Flambeau Indian Reservation. I lived there for 5 years. The state came in and removed my 10 siblings and myself into foster placement. There I grew up in a very, very educated, well-educated home. So I was afforded many good things, that of which probably is the most is my education. I'm very, very grateful to that. I know that my siblings were not given that same opportunity. And so I resolved to take that and help prepare the next generation for that. And by using the arts, my arts abilities, I'm hoping to accomplish that. The last thing that I want to say is, did you know that regarding plastic water bottle pollution, a single-use plastic bottle takes about 450 years to decompose, which I didn't know. That's it. there any questions?